Have you ever wondered why stepping back from an avoidant can sometimes make them think about you even more? The answer isn't about playing games or trying to punish them. It's about creating peace. One of the biggest misunderstandings in relationships is the belief that love is proven by constantly chasing someone. People send repeated messages, explain their feelings over and over, and do everything they can to keep the connection alive. They hope that if they just say the right words, the other person will finally understand. But with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, that approach often has the opposite effect. The harder you chase, the more distance they feel they need. What looks like love to you can feel overwhelming to them. For many avoidants, closeness has never felt completely safe. Instead of bringing comfort, intimacy can trigger anxiety because somewhere in their past, love became linked with pressure, expectations, or losing their sense of independence. So when someone moves toward them too intensely, their natural response is to pull away. The moment you stop chasing, everything begins to change. Instead of reacting from fear or insecurity, you begin acting from self-respect. Your energy shifts completely. Rather than asking someone else to validate your worth, you quietly recognize your own. Without saying a single word, your actions communicate something powerful. You're no longer asking them to choose you, you're choosing yourself. That simple shift changes the entire dynamic. Avoidants aren't emotionless and they aren't incapable of loving deeply. They simply learn to protect themselves differently. Many grew up in environments where affection felt unpredictable, conditional, or emotionally overwhelming. Love may have depended on meeting certain expectations, or perhaps it arrived inconsistently, leaving them unsure when it would disappear again. Over time, they learned that distance felt safer than vulnerability. Pulling away became protection rather than rejection. When you stop chasing an avoidant, you remove the emotional pressure that keeps their defenses active. They no longer feel the need to protect their freedom or prepare for another emotional conversation. Instead, they experience something they rarely associate with relationships. They experience relief, and inside that relief, something important begins to happen. They finally have enough space to notice what isn't there anymore. Your silence becomes a reflection they can't ignore. It gives them time to process their own emotions without feeling pushed toward a conclusion. Instead of seeing the relationship as another obligation, they begin seeing it as something they can freely choose. That difference matters because emotional safety is often what avoidants want most, even if they struggle to admit it. They want to know they can be close to someone without losing themselves. They want connection without feeling controlled. By stepping back, you aren't rejecting them. You're showing them what emotionally healthy love looks like. You're demonstrating that genuine care doesn't always demand attention, constant reassurance, or endless conversations. Sometimes it exists quietly, confidently, and without desperation. From a psychological perspective, this makes perfect sense. An avoidant nervous system usually reacts more strongly to pressure than to distance. When someone constantly pursues them, their stress response activates, making them focus on protecting themselves instead of deepening the relationship. But when the pressure disappears, their mind often shifts from defense to curiosity. Instead of wondering how to escape, they begin wondering about you. Rather than viewing you as someone trying to control the relationship, they begin associating you with calmness and emotional stability. Ironically, the peace you create becomes more attractive than any amount of persuasion ever could. This is one of the biggest paradoxes in human relationships. When your happiness no longer depends on someone choosing you, they often feel safer moving toward you. That's when they start remembering the little things they once overlooked. Your steady energy, your emotional balance, the fact that you walked away with dignity instead of creating conflict or resentment. Those qualities stay with them because avoidants rarely trust emotional intensity. What earns their respect is consistency. Your silence reflects exactly that. It quietly communicates healthy boundaries without needing an explanation. It says, "I'm not here to pressure you. I'm not trying to convince you. You're free to make your own choices." Freedom is exactly what many avoidants secretly long for inside a relationship. When they don't feel trapped, they're much more likely to approach closeness on their own terms. There's something beautiful about that truth. Real love doesn't constantly demand proof. It creates an environment where both people feel safe enough to be themselves. Your silence isn't coldness, it's confidence. It teaches that love doesn't always need to be loud to be genuine. Sometimes the strongest connections are built through patience, emotional stability, and quiet understanding, rather than constant pursuit. Choosing not to chase isn't easy. It requires emotional maturity, because it means resisting the urge to seek validation from someone else's response. But that quiet space transforms more than the relationship. It transforms you. You begin to understand that your value has never depended on whether someone stays or leaves. Love isn't about convincing another person to recognize your worth. It's about recognizing it yourself. Eventually, you realize that silence isn't an empty space waiting to be filled. It's the place where clarity finally appears. And once that clarity arrives, you begin seeing the relationship and yourself in a completely different light. Your value was never determined by how much effort you put into making someone love you. It has always come from how well you love and respect yourself. Here's what surprises many people. The moment you truly let go, an avoidant often begins to notice your absence. It isn't because you're trying to punish them or make them jealous. It's because your energy has changed. You're no longer trying to control how they see you or constantly influence the outcome of the relationship. That quiet shift is what captures their attention. They begin to feel the empty space where your presence once existed. Gradually, they realize that your love wasn't what scared them. It was their own fear of intimacy and vulnerability. That's where everything starts to change. Silence doesn't simply end the pursuit. It breaks the belief that love has to be earned through endless effort. It teaches both people what healthy love actually looks like: freedom without fear, closeness without control, and space without emotional disconnection. If you've stepped back from someone who struggles with intimacy and you're wondering what comes next, the answer isn't complicated. Remain grounded. Allow your silence to communicate what your words no longer need to say. Let your calm, confident presence demonstrate that real love doesn't have to compete or constantly prove itself. Sometimes the deepest expression of love isn't spoken at all. It's felt in the quiet moments between two people. One of the most difficult realities about loving an avoidant is that even sincere, patient love can sometimes feel overwhelming to them. You may offer kindness, understanding, and endless reassurance. But if every interaction is focused on closing the distance, they don't necessarily experience it as care. They experience pressure. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, love that comes with emotional expectations often feels unsafe. It reminds them of earlier experiences where vulnerability brought disappointment, criticism, or emotional pain. That's why one of the most healing messages you can offer isn't, "I love you, so please open up." It's, "I see who you are, and I'm not trying to change you." Those words carry something many avoidants have rarely experienced: acceptance without conditions. You're telling them that you recognize their struggles without making them feel like a project that needs fixing. That kind of acceptance reaches far beyond emotions. It creates safety within the nervous system itself. Think about what emotional closeness feels like for an avoidant. Their body often reacts to intimacy as though it's facing danger. It isn't because they don't want love. In many cases, they want it deeply, but years of experience have taught their mind that closeness may lead to losing freedom, safety, or emotional control. When you constantly try to rescue them, heal them, or prove your devotion, you may unintentionally strengthen that fear. They begin feeling as though they're being pulled towards something they aren't ready to manage. That's usually when they withdraw, not because their feelings disappeared, but because they need distance to regulate themselves. Everything changes when you stop trying to repair them. You quietly communicate that they're allowed to exist exactly as they are. You show them they don't need to earn your acceptance by becoming someone different. That is where authentic connection begins. People don't change because they're pressured into it. They change when they finally feel safe enough to be themselves. Ironically, genuine acceptance often creates the very growth that force never could. This is what many people misunderstand about avoidance. They aren't running away from love itself. They're running from emotional pressure that looks like love. Deep down, they long to know they'll still be respected, even when they need space, even when they're imperfect, and even when they struggle. As your energy shifts away from forcing progress and toward peaceful understanding, they begin relaxing around you. Instead of feeling judged, they begin feeling accepted. That doesn't mean tolerating unhealthy behavior or abandoning your own needs. It means you stop begging to be valued because you've already learned to value yourself. You respond with understanding instead of panic. You spend less time trying to persuade and more time listening. Instead of asking, "Why are you like this?" your attitude becomes, "I understand this isn't easy for you." That isn't weakness, it's emotional strength. It takes real maturity to love from awareness instead of control. Controlling love says, "I'll feel secure when you meet my emotional needs." Healthy love says, "I respect your journey while taking responsibility for my own." That's the kind of love that can truly reach an avoidant heart. And something remarkable often happens when you stop trying to change them. They begin seeing you differently. You become a place of peace rather than pressure. You become someone whose presence feels calming instead of demanding. That quiet stability naturally draws them closer, not because you chased them, but because you gave them room to choose. You stopped trying to force love. Instead, you started living it. Your actions began speaking louder than your words ever could. Never forget this truth. People rarely heal because someone pressured them to change. They heal because someone created an environment where they finally felt safe enough to grow. When a person feels accepted instead of judged, their body relaxes, their mind becomes quieter. Little by little, they begin connecting closeness with peace rather than fear. That's when real healing begins. Not because you rescued them, but because your acceptance reminded them they never needed rescuing in the first place. This is one of the deepest lessons about love. Many people believe loving someone means fixing them or shaping them into the partner they wish they were. But mature love doesn't reshape people. It creates the space where they can grow naturally. You teach through your example. You become living proof that calm, steady love exists. Sometimes that means saying less, doing less, and protecting your own peace when they pull away. Every fearful reaction confirms their belief that intimacy is dangerous. Every calm, self-respecting response quietly teaches them that closeness can be safe. So, when you say, "I see you and I'm not here to fix you," you're not giving up on the relationship. You're choosing a healthier way to love. You're choosing connection instead of control. You're quietly saying, "I care about you enough to let you be who you are, even when it's difficult for both of us." That isn't giving up. It's one of the strongest expressions of love you can offer. The reality is simple. You cannot heal someone who doesn't feel emotionally safe. What you can do is create an environment where they feel safe enough to begin healing themselves. Everything starts with your own energy. It begins with healthy boundaries and the understanding that love isn't about rescuing another person. It's about respecting them while also respecting yourself. The next time you feel the urge to chase, explain yourself, or convince them to stay, stop for a moment, take a breath, remind yourself that acceptance isn't weakness. In many ways, it's one of the purest forms of love. If you can hold on to that mindset long enough, there may come a day when the avoidant who once ran from intimacy realizes something unexpected. They were never running from you. They were running from their own fear, and eventually they may recognize that your presence always felt more like home than a threat. There's a turning point in every relationship with an avoidant. It's the moment you no longer need them to choose you in order to feel whole. It's the moment you realize that chasing isn't love. It's fear disguised as devotion. Avoidants rarely feel drawn toward people who constantly pursue them. Instead, they're often attracted to those who are comfortable in their own worth. Someone who remains calm, secure, and emotionally grounded feels incredibly different from the emotional chaos they've learned to avoid. Once you stop chasing, something changes inside you. You're no longer reaching out to prove your value or searching for reassurance every time they become distant. Instead, you quietly embody confidence. Without saying it aloud, your actions communicate, "I'll be okay whether you're here or not." That silent confidence carries far more weight than endless conversations ever could. It's the energy of emotional independence, and it's something many avoidants secretly long to experience, even if they can't explain it. Most avoidants aren't trying to hurt the people they love. They aren't pulling away to punish you or play emotional games. More often, they're protecting themselves from emotional intensity that feels overwhelming. Somewhere in their past, closeness became linked with losing control. So, creating distance became their way of feeling safe. Everything begins changing when you stop reacting to that distance. When your peace no longer depends on their actions, the entire relationship shifts. Many avoidants try to manage closeness because unpredictability makes them anxious. They control timing, emotional distance, and vulnerability because they struggle to trust that love can remain steady. But when you remain centered instead of chasing after them, you introduce them to something unfamiliar, peace. You're no longer adding to the emotional turbulence they've always expected. Instead, you become the calm they've never known. And that's when fear slowly gives way to curiosity. People naturally become interested in what they cannot control. Your emotional steadiness becomes something they can't predict, influence, or manipulate. That quiet confidence feels both unfamiliar and surprisingly safe. Without making speeches or demanding answers, you're showing them another way to experience love. A love that's stable, grounded, free from pressure. That's where healthy relationships begin. Real love isn't built from two people desperately trying to complete each other. It's built from two emotionally whole individuals choosing one another freely. When you truly believe, "I'll be okay either way," you're not rejecting the avoidant. You're honoring what love was always meant to be. Love doesn't demand. Love allows. It creates room for both people to breathe. It remains steady even when certainty doesn't exist. Avoidants notice these changes more than many people realize. They notice when you stop over-explaining yourself. They notice when you no longer seek constant validation. They notice when your emotional balance isn't controlled by their behavior. That's when they begin seeing you through a completely different lens. Instead of viewing you as someone trying to pull them closer, they begin seeing someone who genuinely understands emotional safety. And that's deeply meaningful because one of an avoidant's greatest fears is losing themselves inside another person's emotions. When you demonstrate that it's possible to love someone without abandoning yourself, you become one of the safest people they've ever encountered. Ironically, what often draws an avoidant closer isn't relentless pursuit. It's your peace. It's your decision to stop begging, stop proving, and stop performing for affection. That quiet confidence leaves a lasting impression. Deep down, many avoidants don't actually want to control every relationship. They're exhausted by constantly protecting themselves. They want to feel safe enough to relax. They want to believe closeness doesn't have to cost them their independence. Your emotional stability offers them a glimpse of that possibility. Psychologically, something important happens as well. When you stop relying on their approval, your nervous system moves away from anxiety and toward regulation. You respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. And emotional regulation has a powerful effect. Human nervous systems naturally influence one another. This process, often called co-regulation, means one person's calm presence can help another person feel safe enough to lower their defenses without realizing it. Your steady energy teaches the avoidant that love doesn't have to feel threatening, not through lectures, not through persuasion, but through your consistent example. That's the real strength of emotional maturity. You stop chasing emotional reactions and start living from inner certainty. Your presence quietly says, "I choose peace instead of panic." That message speaks louder than words. It builds trust, it builds respect, and respect is something many avoidants value deeply. They want to know the person beside them isn't depending on them for emotional survival. That's what makes genuine trust possible. Avoidants aren't usually looking for someone who disappears every time things become difficult. They're looking for someone who stays emotionally steady, someone who doesn't lose themselves when distance appears, someone whose identity isn't dependent on constant closeness, but rooted in quiet confidence. That's what makes someone unforgettable. Not because they're louder than everyone else, but because they're calmer. Most importantly, remember why you're making this change. You're not becoming emotionally grounded to win someone back. You're doing it because you've grown. You've realized that peace is more powerful than pursuit, and self-respect carries more weight than begging for attention. Whether they return is no longer the measure of success. The real victory is knowing you've stopped performing for love and started living from your own worth. You stop trying to earn something that healthy love should offer freely. You stop investing your energy in people who confuse peace with boredom or mistake genuine love for control. And once that shift happens inside you, every relationship begins to change. Not because other people suddenly become different, but because you do. If there's one message an avoidant quietly needs to feel after you stop chasing, it's this: I care about you, but my happiness doesn't depend on whether you stay. That truth brings freedom to both of you. Love has never been proven by pursuit. It's revealed through peace. There comes a quiet moment when you truly understand something life-changing. Love isn't a prison, it's a choice. For someone with an avoidant attachment style, accepting that idea isn't easy. Much of their experience with love has been shaped by fear. The fear of losing themselves, losing control, or reliving painful experiences from the past. Instead of feeling liberating, closeness is often felt as restricting. But when you stop chasing, stop over-explaining, and stop trying to prove your worth, you begin changing what love represents to them. Your calm presence, your patience, and your emotional stability communicate something they may have rarely experienced. I'm not here to trap you. I'm choosing you freely, and you're free to choose me too. That simple shift changes everything. For the first time, love begins to feel safe instead of overwhelming. Avoidants rarely respond well to pressure. They respond to peace. They don't usually become more open because someone demands closeness. They open up when they believe they can connect without sacrificing who they are. Your stillness teaches exactly that. It shows them that love doesn't have to involve control, persuasion, or emotional pressure. It can exist with space. It can remain strong without becoming suffocating. Think about your own experiences. How many times have you held on so tightly that you lost your own sense of peace? How often have you mistaken emotional intensity for genuine intimacy? One of the unexpected lessons an avoidant relationship can teach is that real connection only exists when both people stay because they genuinely want to, not because they're afraid of losing each other. That's the paradox. The tighter you try to hold on, the more distance often appears. But when you let go with trust instead of resentment, you create room for love to breathe. Deep down, that's what many avoidants have always wanted. Not endless distance, freedom within connection. They want to know they can love someone without losing themselves along the way. This reflects one of our deepest psychological needs: autonomy. Every person wants to feel they have the freedom to make their own choices. When you stop trying to control where the relationship is going, you give both yourself and the other person that freedom. They regain the ability to choose, and so do you. That's when love becomes balanced again. Many people misunderstand avoidance. They don't necessarily crave separation. They crave independence while remaining emotionally connected. They want reassurance that love doesn't require giving up their identity. When your energy changes from anxious pursuit to quiet confidence, you show them exactly that. You demonstrate that love isn't about taking someone's freedom. It's about sharing life while respecting each other's individuality. That's what often leaves the deepest impression. Not repeated messages, not emotional pleas, not constant attempts to prove your devotion, but your peace. Your emotional steadiness becomes evidence that you're trying to understand them rather than possess them. Your energy changes from saying, "I need you to complete me," to quietly communicating, "I truly see who you are." And being genuinely seen creates something much deeper than attraction. It creates trust. From a broader perspective, love without freedom eventually becomes possession. Love with freedom becomes authentic connection. That's the kind of relationship that lasts. When you stop trying to control every outcome, both people have the opportunity to show up honestly. The need to manipulate situations for reassurance begins to disappear. Instead, the relationship becomes rooted in mutual respect, and respect is where lasting intimacy grows. Perhaps one of the strongest messages you can silently communicate to an avoidant is this: if you decide to leave, I'll still wish you well. That isn't weakness, it's emotional strength. It reflects a kind of love that doesn't need to hold someone tightly in order to feel secure. It says, I trust you to make your own decisions, and I trust myself to be okay regardless of what happens. That's what emotional maturity looks like. You're not abandoning the relationship. You're allowing love to exist without fear, control, or manipulation. Ironically, that's often when something unexpected happens. The moment they realize you never tried to own them is often the moment they begin missing what they had. They recognize that your love never threatened their freedom. It offered peace. In that quiet space, they begin reflecting. They remember that your care wasn't built on pressure, demands, or constant pursuit. It simply existed. And love expressed that way leaves a lasting mark. It stays with people because it was genuine. When you fully understand that love is a choice instead of a cage, you stop fighting to control every outcome. You stop treating relationships like emotional battles that must be won. Instead, you stand firmly in your truth. You realize that the strongest love doesn't cling, it allows. Freedom doesn't weaken real love, it reveals it. So the next time you feel the urge to chase, explain yourself, or prove your worth, pause before reacting. Remember that your purpose isn't to convince someone to